So Bitcoin Cash is getting a lot of attention recently, and a lot of the stuff that's out there is focusing mostly on the price charts and speculation. And unfortunately, a lot of people just don't know a lot about Bitcoin Cash. And I wanted to try and give a little bit of the other side perspective of why you might want to get into Bitcoin Cash and what the actual fundamentals behind it are. This is not a price charting video. This is a why it's actually worth it. So, why Bitcoin Cash? Number one, it is Bitcoin. And this is not to get people riled up and instantly click off the video, but there is a purpose behind this. Bitcoin Cash is a fork of Bitcoin. You could argue that BTC is also a fork. It's a path that Bitcoin has taken. Bitcoin started back in 2009, and it was only the one at the time. And it had a number of, as we can see on the chart here, a number of upgrades that happened that changed Bitcoin. And in 2017, there was another change. It was that Bitcoin split into two coins. The community of Bitcoin went to BTC and to BCH, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. I'm not going to go into the reasons specifically behind this, but just suffice to say, two coins emerged and they had different paths. And we're going to go over this. So the upgrades we can see on this chart, which is a little blurry, I apologize. The orange line is BTC. And as we can see, there is not much happening since the fork happened. There was an emergency fix for an inflation bug, where in theory, you could have minted new Bitcoins, both BCH and BTC, because of a flaw in the code. And this was actually discovered by a Bitcoin Cash developer. So this was a change that happened on both coins. And besides that, BTC has had Taproot added, which has, and Schnorr signatures. Not going to go into specifics. The other thing about the chart, though, is that there is way more upgrades on Bitcoin Cash. Like, there is way more stuff going on, way more things added. You can just look at this. This is not a controversial thing. It is just facts. There has been way more upgrades on Bitcoin Cash. So it comes down to, what do you want in a crypto? So in terms of Bitcoin, it has a limited supply. There's 21 million coins. That's one of the main features of it. It is decentralized. There is no single person calling the shots, and it has had a fair distribution. So the coins have been slowly given out to miners over time. These are very important values for Bitcoin that people tend to gravitate towards. Next is store of value. So if Bitcoin is working correctly, it will be a store of value. And this is because of the design of Bitcoin. Like the way it was architected by Satoshi was, there's a very big greed aspect to the design where people get into it and they want other people to get into it. It's part of the reason everything's so tribal in crypto. And naturally, if everybody gets into it, it will go up in value. And therefore, it will be a store of value. So same thing would be like gold, silver, etc. in the past. Anything that is popular and in demand long term is a store of value. And if Bitcoin is working correctly, then people will want it and it'll stick around long term. And therefore, if it's useful, it will be a store of value. So this is another aspect of Bitcoin if it works correctly. So you have to ask yourself, with Bitcoin, what do you want it for? There's those four aspects. What else do you want? So one of them is cost to use. Do you want it to be cheap to use or expensive to use? What one do you think would be better? For transactions, do you want them to be fast or slow? Very simple question, no trick. Is it better to be fast when you send something or slow when you send something? Do you want it to be programmable? Do you want your money to have utility? Do you want it to do things that are more useful than simply sending a transaction. This is a little more loaded for some people because they don't want that stuff. They want something very basic. But it's a new form of money. It's programmable money. It's a digital money. It can do more things. So the option is there to have utility. Do you want that? Yes or no? Who do you want to use it? This gets a little more abstract. You need to look into it more. But do you want everyone to use Bitcoin? Or do you only want a few people to use it? This is the big question between BTC and BCH. This is a big part of the reason the fork happened. And it's pretty obvious that this is how they line up. If you want cheap, fast, programmable money that anybody can use, that is Bitcoin Cash. If you want the opposite, that is BTC. So, scaling on Bitcoin Cash. On BTC, you're looking at about 3 to 7 transactions per second. Almost nothing. We'll say Visa, after some quick Googling and stuff, about 8,500 transactions per second. It peaks out, say, around 80,000. And that'll be like, Christmas weeks, month, December or something. Bitcoin Cash with 32 megabyte blocks, you're looking at about 177 transactions per second. Then that's before block sizes potentially adjust. So to give an example of something people might relate to a little bit more, because this gets super technical, there's a lot of edge cases, there's a lot of things you need to consider, even outside of bandwidth and stuff. But let's just keep it kind of simple. But I do encourage you to dive into the specifics if it really concerns you. Streaming a movie, 1080p movie, takes about 5 to 8 megabits of bandwidth. That's about 3 gigabytes altogether, average movie. How much block size, or rather, how many transactions does that equal? So if you can watch a movie on your computer, how many transactions would that movie be? 2,500 to 4,000. That's a lot more than BCH at 32 megabyte blocks. How many people can stream a movie today in their house around the world? Starts to make you think a little bit of how much people can actually do in a decentralized way. It definitely seems like 3 to 7 transactions per second maybe isn't the right answer. So, of course, it's a complicated subject. People are going to nitpick at everything, and they say it's more complicated. Again, you'll have to dig into the specifics yourselves. But as an example, 2019, here's a random title off of Reddit of some post about how Bitcoin Cash was trying to scale up, and they had problems at 22 megabyte blocks. And then they worked on it for a bit, and then they got up to 100 megabyte blocks. And then it started dying again. So they went from 22 up to 100. And this person is still criticizing because they were trying to get 128 at the time. Advance a couple of years, and now they're doing 1 gigabyte blocks on a Raspberry Pi. And it definitely wasn't like production ready, but it was technically done. And that was almost 5 years ago now. And things can get a lot better. So this again makes you think a little bit. Is 3 to 7 transactions per second actually what you want? So to dive in a little bit more, because there is so much stuff people could poke at this to try and get you in little gotchas and stuff. It takes a long time to go through all the specifics and all of the edge cases. There's this article on read.cash, the link's there. I go over some situations of like the overall design of BTC versus BCH, and should you do a small number of transactions with high fees or a lot of little transactions with low fees. And again, there's a lot of stuff to it. I also did a podcast with my wife, going over some of the anti-BCH myths. A lot of it was just around block sizes and stuff like that specifically. You can check this out if you want. So this is a list. I'll minimize my camera for this. This is a list of developers or people that have been doing random technical projects on Bitcoin Cash. This is not a exhaustive list. This is just the people that were like the top of my head that I've either interacted with myself or I know of because I've seen them in chat groups that I'm personally involved in. So this is just kind of like a counter argument that, because there's a lot of misinformation out there that nobody uses Bitcoin Cash. There's nobody behind it. Bitcoin Cash is decentralized. It is, there's tons of people coming and going all the time. There's people that have been here for a very long time, and there are people that are just joining. Actually, I've had to add a few more names to this list because of some recent hackathons where people have started developing new projects that I've never seen before. And this is only, like I said, people that I know. There's a large South American community I have almost no involvement with, and I don't really know the people involved, but I've seen a bunch of the content from them. I know there's a decent-sized Asian community, especially in China, that, again, I have almost zero interaction with. There is people in Bitcoin Cash. It is a big network, and, I mean, it's nearly top 10 ranking. Like, there is obviously something going on here. So why? I'll try to sell you on the upgrades. So Bitcoin Cash has had like a dozen upgrades that happened. We saw on that chart. I will very quickly go through some of these upgrades. When Bitcoin Cash first forked, there was a change to the difficulty adjustment. So Bitcoin has blocks every 10 minutes. Every 2 weeks, those blocks are taken into account and the difficulty is changed for the miners. So if the blocks came out too quickly, the difficulty goes up so that it's harder for the miners to find new blocks, so that it maintains at 10 minutes per block. It tries to. So when Bitcoin Cash forked, it was very obvious that if it maintained the same difficulty adjustment that Bitcoin has, Bitcoin Cash was going to die. It wasn't going to be able to survive because the amount of miners, the mining hash power wouldn't have been enough to keep it going. And this is why they implemented the EDA, the emergency difficulty algorithm. So this reduced the difficulty on the Bitcoin Cash fork so that it could keep going with a reduced amount of miners. Unfortunately, this was very broken. It did what it was on the tin. It made the chain survive, but it was very easily gamed miners pretty quickly, which is why Bitcoin Cash ended up having more blocks than BTC, because they're able to basically hash out a ton of them very quickly. So the community was very upset by this, and this is why the new difficulty adjustment, the difficulty adjustment algorithm came out, which made it a lot better, but the miners were still able to figure out a way to slightly game it. And then that was again upgraded to the ACERT difficulty adjustment, which is what Bitcoin Cash is currently using. So this is one point where people, especially on the BTC Maxi side, will point at Bitcoin Cash and say, it's not the real Bitcoin. It's a fake. They changed this thing. That's a core fundamental. I don't really care about like what's the true. I care about what's useful and real and usable. So my only counter argument to that is going to be, imagine BTC exists today. It has the original difficulty adjustment. A new coin comes up, a new network that is SHA-256, which is what Bitcoin uses. Maybe it starts getting a lot of mining hash power. It starts attracting a lot of them. Maybe it's Bitcoin Cash coming up in the future at some point. If a lot of mining hash power switches over in large chunks or suddenly, the mining difficulty adjustment on BTC is very susceptible and vulnerable to sudden losses. So instead of every 2 weeks for the adjustment, maybe it shifts over to every 4 weeks. That would not be cool. It would take blocks a lot longer to come out. It's survivable. what if it's every 2 months? What if it's every 5 months? What if it's a year? So there is a bit of a death spiral possibility where enough hash power abandons the chain that the difficulty adjustment is going to slow it down so much that it's going to shake users' confidence. And because it takes so long for confirmations to happen, that the users start running on the chain. It's like a bank run almost, where they lose confidence and start abandoning it, which makes it worse over time. So just at a fundamental level, the difficulty adjustment, when you factor in scenarios like that, Bitcoin Cash has been through the trenches. It has done multiple upgrades. It has done a lot of research into it. And the difficulty adjustment it has today is simply better than what Bitcoin started with. Schnorr signatures, we touched on this earlier. This was one of the things that was added to BTC. It actually was added to Bitcoin Cash, I believe, 2 years earlier than on BTC. So nothing else special to say about that. You can look into it if you want. Multiple op returns. BCH has multiple op returns. So this is for referencing data on chain. I don't believe BTC does multiple. So this is just a random thing that BCH added. Remove the unconfirmed transaction limit. So BTC doesn't really like unconfirmed transactions because they use replace by fee, which allows people to basically double spend transactions that are in the mempool easily. BCH doesn't have that integrated into it, and they also removed the unconfirmed limit so that you can, in theory, do multiple transactions over time. I've run into this myself in the past before it was upped, where you'd do transactions and you'd build up a certain number of them, and then you'd have to wait for a block to count because you couldn't spend the coins that were like 10 deep or 20 deep or whatever it was that had, and all of them have not been confirmed yet. So that's now gone. You can go much higher than that. Unbounded integers. So the Bitcoin Cash or the Bitcoin VM is 32-bit integers. For developers, this is more like the developer side of what you can do with the chain. So basically, you can use numbers that are 32 bits long. Bitcoin Cash went to 64 bits, and then they actually went to unbounded. So you can do anything with any number within the computation limits of the chain now, which is going to be part of the contracting stuff in a second. ABLA. So the big reason Bitcoin Cash and BTC split was the block size. BTC decided to limit the block size. Bitcoin Cash did not want to limit it, or at least wanted to increase it quite a bit. The adjusted block size algorithm has automatic adjusting blocks on Bitcoin Cash. So if the chain is used more, the block size gets bigger. If it's a minimum 32 megabytes, so it'll never go below 32 megabytes as a maximum. So it's not every block is 32. It's just that is the limit for the minimum size, or the maximum. That's the lowest the maximum size will go. And if it starts getting close to that, all of a sudden that 32 megabytes will start growing. And technically, it could go up quite a bit, but then if it starts getting used less, that block size will start shrinking again. But it'll never go below 32 megabytes. So this is just something where the fork happened because of the block size. Bitcoin Cash has implemented a change so that even if the developers never want to touch the block size again, it will go up and down regardless of the developers. It's not in their control anymore. If Bitcoin Cash starts getting massive adoption, the block size will go up. If it starts getting a lot of congestion because it's being used too much, it will go up. It'll just take a little bit of time for the algorithm to adjust. Introspection. Bitcoin Cash added introspection so that this kind of ties into the smart contract stuff. So this, we'll go over this in a second. Re-enabled opcodes. Again, in the upgrades, this has to do with the scripting and contracting stuff. Bitcoin Cash hasn't re-enabled a ton of opcodes. And then the virtual machine limits, again, scripting, contracting. This has reworked quite a bit of how much power the Bitcoin Cash VM for contracts can do, and remove some of the limits. These three, the introspection, opcodes, and limits, are very important and are more recent upgrades to Bitcoin Cash that allow us to do contracts. So another thing is that there was tokens on Bitcoin Cash. So if you're coming from a BTC side, you probably know about things like ordinals and ruins and all these random token standards to try and do things like NFTs and stuff, because they were so gigantically popular on Ethereum. Once they figured out how to do it on UTXO and BTC, they started running away with it as well. Interesting thing is that Bitcoin Cash front ran this quite a bit. In 2018, we had the Simple Ledger Protocol, the SLP. And this is similar in a lot of ways to things like ordinals. It uses indexing servers, so you have to run separate infrastructure servers that will track like the ownership and balances and stuff like that of the tokens that are living on the chain. The problem is that the Bitcoin Cash, or rather the Bitcoin whatever blockchain, it's not aware of these tokens. Like it's tracking the individual UTXOs, the Satoshis, however method you're using to do the transfers, but it's not tracking ownership. And it's very easy for wallets and stuff like that to accidentally burn things by combining them together because it didn't realize there was tokens involved. And there was also overall limited use. So you could do some basic stuff with this, but like it's ownership of NFTs and basic tokens. There's not much you can do with it. On Bitcoin Cash, there was also cash tokens. And this is 2023, so this is a more recent thing. So this actually killed off SLP. And so this I want to highlight for a second, especially for people that know BTC but don't know Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash had ordinal, etc., similar protocols. They've had them for like 7 years or so. The Bitcoin Cash community decided to kill it, more or less. They stopped working on it. It lost interest. There was issues with the indexing servers and scaling them. There was UX user issues. And overall, there was just kind of like limited use of them. There's limited things you can do. When cash tokens came out, it was very obvious that cash tokens was the right way to do it after people and devs started looking into it. Why? They are native. They are actually part of the chain. So the nodes are aware of the tokens that are living on the chain. There's no external indexing servers that are tracking balances and ownership. It's much harder to burn them. There's NFTs, but there's also fungible tokens. So if you think Ethereum-wise, it has native tokens. It has native NFTs. That's all the same on cash tokens. Obviously, all UTXO. Just to clarify, cash tokens is layer 1 native on chain. There's no external protocol involved in this. This is all actually directly in Bitcoin Cash itself. And there's also local state. And this is very important for the contract side. So the NFTs can have a little bit of data stored on them, which is state. So Ethereum has global state, and that's actually part of the reason it's so hard for it to scale, is that it has this global state thing that everybody has to keep track of. Bitcoin Cash does not have global state. It is very easy to scale it up. It's very parallel, and it accomplishes a lot of the stuff that global state does on Ethereum using local state instead, in a different way of doing it. So as another difference for Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, this is a comment this is some code from the original Bitcoin code that Satoshi wrote. And highlighted here is the comment that there are no loops in Bitcoin. And this was just taken kind of as gospel, as from a lot of people and devs, that you cannot do loops on Bitcoin. And that was kind of misinterpreted. It's not that you cannot do loops, it's that there are no loops in this implementation. And if you wanted to actually go through a video that deep dives it a little bit, this Bitcoin Cash podcast episode with Jason Dreisner, he goes over how Satoshi was, how he was coding in the early days and when he was talking to people and the way he was committing code. and how he was actually disabling things frantically as people were talking about it and discovering things, and Satoshi likely realizing that there was like very network destroying bugs that he left in, and the fact that there are no loops is probably just because he didn't know how to fix it in a quick way and just decided to disable it instead. So why is this relevant? There are loops on Bitcoin Cash coming up next year in 2026, where Bitcoin Cash contracts are going to be able to do loops. And this is all tied to the past upgrades that we went over a little bit. And this chip that Jason Dreisner wrote, which you can check out here. So because of the re-enabled opcodes and the introspection, we are able to do quite a bit of stuff. And the cash tokens as well are in this, obviously. So this is a bunch of opcodes. And if you're not a developer, that's okay. But this is kind of like the inner workings of Bitcoin when it's when the nodes are verifying things with transactions. So they all start with op, and that's designating that they're all opcodes. This is actually a smart contract on Bitcoin Cash. And just to clarify, all of these red ones, BTC does not have. It cannot do any of this. And this is part of the reason why Bitcoin Cash is so far ahead and can do these things, is because of these opcodes. And this is only a section, like it's a few of them. This is just one example contract on Bitcoin Cash. This are just ones that happen to use in this contract. So what does this contract do on Bitcoin Cash? It does this. Some people look at this and say, hey, that's Uniswap. No, that is Cauldron.quest. That is a decentralized exchange running directly on Bitcoin Cash. There's no external protocol. There's no other project running like off-chain contracts or logic or code and then like attesting it back to the Bitcoin chain or anything. No, this is UTXO smart contracts. This is running a DEX. If you wanted to go over the creation of this DEX, Dagger of Riften Labs does a presentation here in the 2024 Bliss conference. That is a really good one to go over. So I'm going to YouTubeception a little bit right here. About a year ago, I made a quick little hype video, which I think kind of just drives home the point a little bit more about this. So it's about a minute long. You can skip it if you want, but I'm going to post it here.
So there's a thing out there called cash tokens.
Why is cash tokens such a big deal? Why the hype?
This is going to blow people's minds when they understand what it does.
Some people are off trying to duplicate and adapt and improve things that are already really big, some of them billions of dollars in TVL on Ethereum, and try to do it on BCH, because if you adapt it well enough, it could scale really well.
For anyone who understands crypto today, they think, oh, okay, there's payments, yeah, and it's cool that Bitcoin Cash can do that. And then there's smart contracts, and that's done by others. No.
Fees would be low even if we saw 1,000 times the usage of the Ethereum network.
With cash tokens, Bitcoin Cash will be the most powerful UTXO chain in the world. And it will arguably be the most powerful crypto chain in the world because it combines the smart contracts, the full power of smart contracts, with scalability. This is something that doesn't exist yet.
So that's why this is such a big deal, is because it enables similar functionality to Ethereum. And we know the EVM is hugely popular, but it solves the scaling problems by using Bitcoin Cash and the UTXO architecture.
And on the tooling side, how do you feel like that's doing? Like you said, now a lot of this tooling has come along, Libworth and ChainGraph and whatever. Are we going to see another year of huge development in that space, or is the activity going to move onto apps?
Oh, that's going to get exponentially better. Yeah, no, the tooling and the libraries and all of that stuff is just going to keep growing. Like what CashScript does today, we couldn't have imagined somebody doing that back in like 2018.
So those videos were from the 2024 Bliss conference. And the point the video is trying to make is that EVM is extremely popular. And there's a massive amount of interest in the utility that smart contracts can offer for crypto. And Ethereum could have been developed on Bitcoin in the past, if you look into it. And because of decisions that were made on Bitcoin in the community, it wasn't. It ended up being its own thing. But it doesn't mean it has to be. And Cash tokens and all of the upgrades that have happened to Bitcoin Cash are proving that Bitcoin can do smart contracts. And Bitcoin Cash is doing it. And I will go over some examples here. FundMe.cash. This is actually something I've made. This is Kickstarter. If you know what Kickstarter is, crowdfunding online, that's what FundMe.cash is. It uses BCH on the chain. The funds are handled on the chain itself through the contracts. And there's no, again, third party involved. People put their money into the contracts. The contracts designate what can and cannot happen. And in this case, people put pledges onto campaigns for people trying to raise money for something. Every pledger gets a NFT, and that NFT allows them to take their pledge back out if they want, unless the campaign gets claimed, because it succeeds, because the owner money. So that's just a quick example. The GitHub is there that shows you the contracts, how to do it. Another one is badgers.cash. This is another one that I made, and again, the GitHub is there. So this allows you to take Bitcoin Cash, lock it into a smart contract, and depending on how long the BCH is locked up for, it'll give you Badger coins once the lock is completed, and you reclaim your BCH. So you get BCH and tokens back. And this was just a very simple contract with me learning how to do things, but there's just a basic example of some sort of vault that you can do. And once again, it is all on chain, 100% secure, not involved with some third party having control of anything. So that's basic token issuance, or at least one method of doing it. Another thing I want to learn is, can you do NFTs on BCH? The answer was yes. And so you can do NFTs. In this case, I made these little honey badger ones. But because NFTs have a little bit of state in their commitments that you can use, I put stats on these NFTs. So strength, stamina, etc. Maybe being used for games and stuff in the future. But these stats are on the UTXOs on the chain, and they can actually be interpreted by anybody without using external indexing servers. So when you trade an NFT and you give them that UTXO, you are giving them the stats as well because they're embedded inside of it. Another example one I did recently for the 2025 Bliss conference was chess. If you want to play chess directly on chain, you can technically do it with Cash tokens because it allows you to program with Bitcoin Cash. And every UTXO, or rather every square of the board, as you can see on here, is a UTXO. And so the smart contract of the chessboard is one contract, and it has 64 UTXOs inside of it. And once again, the contracts are available on GitHub, so anybody can look to see how this is done. And I don't have anything running online for this, but this is just kind of showing you examples of what can happen and what is going to happen. Another random application that's coming out or it's being developed by one guy currently, is layer1.cash. So a notorious thing with UTXO contracts is that they're very different than EVM. They are extremely different mind space of how you're supposed to design these contracts. This, I believe, is a first, although there might be something out there I'm not aware of, but this is trying to make Solidity contracts simply be converted over to UTXO architecture. And currently it is nowhere near being used production level, but even I've used it a few times here and there, and it's like interesting some of the leaps it's making on how to do the contracting language, or do the contracts with the contracting language. So the point of this being is that right now with UTXO, with Cash script, Cash tokens, Bitcoin Cash, a lot of things are being created for the first time because they haven't existed in UTXO with the full capability that Bitcoin Cash is now allowing exist. And this is showing the acceleration that could be happening in the future. So returning to smart contracts for a second, this is something else of like, why BCH now? Like, why should you consider BCH or think it's better than BTC? It is very clear that Ethereum is massively popular. It has a ton of utility. There are like hundreds of networks that have spawned from it. There's billions and billions of dollars locked up in TVL. This is a YouTube search for Learn UTXO. And these are the videos that popped up in the number of views, with the most views for this topic. And I tried a couple different terms, but this seemed like the best one from what I did. 33,000, 29,000, 21,000. Not many people have looked at this. What if we do learn Solidity, which is the Ethereum smart contracting language, the main one? There's a little bit of a difference. There is a lot more eyes and use on smart contracts. I also wanted to throw this tidbit out. UTXO chains. So these are like the top 20. I mean, there's not a lot of UTXO chains in general, but just kind of looking at the top of CoinMarketCap, for example, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Cardano, Bitcoin Cash, Zcash, and Monero. And it has their market values on them currently at time of recording. Which one of these do you think have smart contracts? Because smart contracts on UTXO chains aren't popular. They aren't common. They're pretty rare. Everything's EVM. Everything's Ethereum based. Cardano and Bitcoin Cash. Cardano has had some smart contracting stuff for a while. I've looked at it myself a little bit. I haven't done anything with it, but to me it seems a little complicated and hard to get into and kind of restrictive in some ways. Bitcoin Cash, almost nobody knows about it yet, that it can even do smart contracts. People think Bitcoin, they think it can't do smart contracts. It's just because they don't know yet. So just to drive this point home a little bit more, that the smart contract stuff that's happening on Bitcoin Cash is new, unique, and a big opportunity. Is the fact that everything is EVM and a lot of developers are fighting off jobs with six-figure salaries everywhere, doing Solidity in EVM contracts. On UTXO, on Bitcoin Cash, this is an example of the Badger application that I showed earlier, and the fact that it's a contract in Square, and then it's got NFTs inside of it. And then on the side, we see there's a lock, unlock, and a withdraw functions that can be called on the contract. So this is simple. This is very simple. There's not a lot going on, but it's UTXO contracts with NFTs to allow functions to happen. This is very different than EVM. You cannot take a Solidity developer and plop them into this and have them just work on it and understand it and go, because it takes a different mindset. People are learning this and what it can actually do. And this is causing it to be a bit of a Wild West for the last little bit of anybody getting into it and learning. It's what I've always likened it to is it's Ethereum again. Ethereum came out, Solidity came out. It was a Wild West of contracts and utility and new things happening and people developing. That's what it feels like on Bitcoin Cash now. Just to continue, this is an example, slightly more complicated, of the Fund Me campaign system or contract system that I mentioned earlier. This one uses the 2 contracts in squares, and then also 4 different contracts using NFTs as kind of function NFTs. So they interact with the Cash Starter campaigns with additional logic. Again, decently different than EVM. But once developers click how it's supposed to work, all of a sudden, if you want to do something, you can. It's just a matter of architecting it. And the currently most complicated, I believe, system on Bitcoin Cash would be Parity USD, which as of now hasn't launched yet. But this is kind of like a top-level view of the contracts. And this is much more complicated. There's 26 contracts involved in this. So like this is going to scare away developers potentially, but it makes logical sense. And I've developed an EVM application before that was like this. It seemed complicated, but once you break it into pieces, there's a logic you can follow through. The interesting thing is that this design, so this is a stable coin based off the Liquidity V2 design, which is an EVM stablecoin project, well regarded. And this has been converted into UTXO. And this is also novel because there's different things about this versus the EVM one. The interesting thing is that this is based off the 2025, I believe, or 2024. Anyways, it's based off the old Cash VM for Bitcoin Cash. There has been upgrades to Bitcoin Cash since this contract system was started to be developed. So this entire system is going to get launched, and there's an application being built around it. But if you wanted to do this today, it could be simpler and smaller, potentially better, because Bitcoin Cash is still upgrading. There are still things happening. But the upgrades that are happening now are starting to be near feature complete, you could say. It's getting very powerful. So this is just kind of an example of how fast it's going, how things are evolving, and if somebody wants to get involved in this space, there is a massive opportunity. So this was just a quick video by me over a couple nights with some of my random thoughts about people that are maybe looking to Bitcoin Cash and what this thing is about. And does it have legs? And this is from somebody that isn't focused on the price charting and all the technical analysis, but the more fundamental side. Bitcoin was designed to change the world. Bitcoin Cash is still on the path to change the world. There's a lot of BTC side drama I've seen, and it's a big ecosystem, but the drama I've seen about like Bitcoin people having lost their way. They didn't lose their way. Bitcoin Cash people have been around, they've been building, they're not stopping, and they want this to succeed. And the thing with Bitcoin in the early days was that the common topic people said was, if another coin gets some good thing, isn't that going to make Bitcoin outdated? And the argument, the rebuttal was, no, Bitcoin's programmable. You can add things, you can change things. It's digital. You can do coding with it. You'll add it. If it's that good, Bitcoin will add it. And all of a sudden, that other thing is now obsolete because Bitcoin is already around. It has people, it has users. It has that network effect. Bitcoin Cash has been living that. It has been updating and advancing and doing new things and taking things like smart contracts from Ethereum, which started it, and integrating them in the UTXO model, which makes sense, keeps it decentralized still, the way it's implemented, and gives the utility in its own way that is still scalable. So Bitcoin was all about absorbing the good things. That reminds me of something.
Add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
I am Bitcoin, I'm not nervous. I'm the tech that changes what society is. I am money, I create freedom, and I'm limited, so I know what my worth is. I don't ask how high the fee is. I don't open, verifiable blockchain. Hashes and transactions, I find and I process. I verify what I'm handed, I trust what's commanded. But under the surface, I feel berserk like a keyboard warrior that's suddenly wordless. Under the surface, was Satoshi ever like, yo, I don't wanna fight big banks. Under the surface, I'm pretty sure I'm worthless if I can't be of service. A bug or a hack, a line in the stack that breaks the camel's back. What breaks the camel's back? It's growth of the fees that'll never stop. Whoa. Users that'll leave till we just go bump. Whoa. Give it to BCH, their blocks got bigger, and all we got was this damn ticker. Who am I if I can't scale with the bull? If I fall to payments that are slow, and they just won't go. Whoa. Fees that'll grow till it's ready to blow. Whoa. Give it to Satoshi, blockchain is stronger. See the users throw away the dollar. Who am I if I can't verify it at all? If I falter under the surface, I had my nerves and it worsens. I worry a central chain will hurt us. Under the surface, the miners will leave. They need fees, lighting will kill this. Under the surface, I think about the white paper. Can we somehow preserve it? Line up Maxis, yo, electronic gold blows. Who can try to stop it tumbling, but on it goes. But wait, if I could scale to support the whole world's transactions, would that free some room up for more developmentation or simple uses? Instead we measure this growing blockchain. Keeps growing, keep going, 'cause all we see is rising of the fees that'll never stop. Whoa. Users that'll leave till we just go pop. Whoa. BCH is Bitcoin, the original purpose. See why it can sustain all the miners' income. Watch as Satoshi's design bends but never breaks. No mistakes, just fees that'll